Chapter 8. Anyone else you need to talk to? Asked Bart. Just John Lorden, I said. Hopefully we'll hear from Derek shortly after. We don't. I'm going to have to confront who I think did it. Who that was I wasn't sure of. I hope John would help clear some things up. My top 2 suspects were Mary and Chad, but nothing was certain. John sat at his station, arms crossed and staring at the crowd with a scowl. Not surprisingly, there wasn't anyone in his line. Hi again. I smiled as we walked up. You again, he grunted. Come back to tell me trash my chili is compared to Marvin's. I never said that, I said, lifting my hands up to show I meant no harm. Speaking of Marvin, did you hear what happened? Of course I heard, he barked. Do you think I live under a rock or something? It's just that I bumped into you as you were walking away from his direction. When it happened, I said, trying to read his face. It was hard seeing if there were different shades of anger for him or not. It all seemed pretty similar. What were you doing over there, by the way? Are you playing at being a cop now? He asked. I already told them what happened. After someone insulted my cooking, I went off to use the can. It's in the same area that Marvin died, sure, but I had nothing to do with it. His alibi was that he went to the bathroom? That seemed pretty weak. Surely you heard all the cries for help as you made your way back, I said. Thinking back. I ain't no doctor, he said. What was I gonna do about it? That's one way to look at it, I said. That seemed to logically fit him. Any other questions I can help answer for you, Miss Detective? You don't mind? I asked. What do I care? He shrugged, glaring at all the people passing by. This event is over from my point of view. I already paid for a hotel tonight, but they told me they're still getting it ready. That's Twistchapel for ya. Anyway, I'm just waiting here until they give me a call that I can move my stuff in for the night. Well, do you think there's a reason why someone would want Marvin dead? Asked. You really think someone killed him, eh? Chuckled John. I mean, would I have loved him to stop showing up to chili cook-offs in the future? Absolutely. Would killing him, especially right now, be a good move? Nah. If I did it, you'd never find his body. Maybe don't hang out with this guy in private, recommended Bart, eyeing him up and down. I had no intention to. I just think some people might feel like they benefit from his death, I said, trying to be careful with my words. I wanted to see how he'd react to the idea without me explicitly accusing him of it. Are you kidding? Everyone's going to vote for him now, he shouted. More than one passerby turned to look at us. We've all lost again. On top of that, these cook-offs are probably a thing of the past now. A thing of the past? First, what happened to Ned? Now this. People are going to be too scared to come to these anymore, he said, shaking his head. If someone did kill Marvin, and intentionally, then they ruined the whole thing for all of us. You don't think they'll do any more of these events? Would you want to cook for an event where the participants die nearly every time? He laughed. Hard pass for the average person. Me? I'm not scared of nothing. But I could see so many people dropping out of future ones that there wouldn't be enough left to hold the events. That's too bad, I said. I would have assumed that Marvin would want these to keep going even though he died at one. Now that one with Ned in Spring Hill, that was a crazy one, said John. I saw the body, you know that? Gruesome, gruesome sight. You saw it? I asked. How was he in a position to see Ned's body? Was he involved in the murder? I was the one who found him, he said, shaking his head. Well, me and another guy. Who was with you? I asked. Another one of the other cook-off contestants. The bald guy, Chad Buchanan. Chad was there when they found Ned, and he was there when Marvin died. That had to be it. He had to be the murderer. Chad found the body with you? I asked, trying to contain my excitement at figuring out who killed Marvin. Was he the one that led you there? How did he act when you guys found Ned? Suspicious at all? Whoa, 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 said John, holding up his hands. Slow down there, Chipmunk. I think I see where you're going with this, but unfortunately you're wrong. Chad was with me the whole time I was in Spring Hill, including that night. We spent a few hours in a bar recommended by a buddy, and Chad had a bit too much to drink. The reason we found Ned was because Chad had to stop to take a leak. He decided to relieve himself on a random gate, and all of a sudden we heard some lady scream. Naturally, I thought it was because she saw Chad exposing himself in public, but that turned out to be wrong. We rushed to the other side of the gate to apologize to the woman, and instead found Ned's body. I deflated as John talked. Maybe I was wrong. Unless of course John was involved in just covering for his accomplice. His bathroom story seemed weak at best, and he was clearly the most aggressive of all the suspects I talked to. Before I could ask another question, his phone buzzed. He glanced down at it and grunted. About time, he said. Hotel's finally ready. This has been fun and all, but I'm gonna take my leave now. The cops know where I'll be staying tonight, so if the real detectives need anything more from me, I'm sure they'll say hello. Leaving his station to be cleaned up by someone else, he picked up a backpack and left. Should we chase after him? Asked Bart. I could try and hide in his backpack if you'd like. Thanks, but I think I'm good, I said. I'm not sure how much I can trust him, and he doesn't seem like he wants to talk anymore. Do you know who did it then? I shook my head. Even after talking to nearly everyone I wanted to, I was left with more questions than answers. The only thing I was fairly certain of was that the wolfsbane is what killed Marvin. I had no idea who or even why someone would want to. John was probably right when he said Marvin will get even more votes, and I could see this being the end of the chili cook-offs. Maybe Derek was chasing down the wrong lead, and Marvin was given the wolfsbane by accident. Mary didn't seem to have total control of the substance, and some might have accidentally slipped into the scoop she gave the firefighter. Hey, Miss Foster, came a voice. I turned to see Jerry, this time alone. Were you just talking to John? I was, I nodded. That must have been rough, he laughed. The poor guy is always such a grouch. I ran into him while he was leaving the porta-potty earlier, and he practically bit my head off for not getting out of his way in time. You ran into him while he was leaving the bathroom? I asked. When was that? I hate to admit it, but it was when Marvin died, he said, shaking his head. Not that I could have done anything to help Marvin, but I should have been there with him. He was there when John came out of the bathroom, so John was telling the truth at least there. That gave more credence to the other details he told me. Mind if I ask you a couple more questions? I asked. Sure, nodded Jerry. Anything I can do to help. You mentioned something that sounded a little out of the ordinary earlier, I said, trying to see if he'd open up more now that the other firefighters weren't around. I don't know if I should go into it, he said, looking away. It was probably nothing. I promise not to judge you, even if it sounds really out there, I said. Jerry looked unsure, still not looking at me. It might seem like nothing, but maybe it'll help us figure out what happened to Marvin, I tried. He'd want you to share it with me, right? I guess it couldn't hurt, he said slowly. Promise not to laugh? I promise. A few years back, a house was starting to cave in, began Jerry, eyes glazing over while he thought back. However, the woman living there said there was still a young girl inside. It wasn't safe anymore for us to go in. Marvin didn't care. No one ever wanted someone to die in a fire, but with Marvin it was an obsession. He had to try and save everybody. So against all of our judgment, he ran in anyway. I waited a second, then followed after him. Even if we couldn't save the kid, maybe I could make sure he didn't die. That's very brave, I said, nodding. No, just foolish, said Jerry, blushing slightly. Anyway, Marvin was running through the fire faster than I could keep up, and he ended up finding the little girl, passed out in her bedroom. I caught up to him as he turned to leave the girl in his arms. I was starting to think we were actually going to make it, until a column in the house collapsed right in front of us, blocking our way. The whole place was in flames, including the column now in front of us. We had no way out, and I began to pray. I knew it was all over. Marvin shoved the girl into my arms for some reason, surprising me. Then all of a sudden, Marvin reached out his hands, and water appeared. I see, purred Bart slowly. Now it makes sense that they haven't lost someone to a fire once Marvin was hired. Water? I asked, puzzled. I wanted to ask Bart what he knew, but it had to wait. I know it sounds crazy, Miss Foster, but it was like a spring of water burst out of his hand. It completely drenched the column in front of us, killing the flames. He took the girl back from me, shouted to follow him, and we made it out safely. The girl was given an oxygen mask and ended up living. I know it all sounds crazy, but it really did happen. It was a miracle. Did you talk to Marvin about it later? I asked. I did, but he denied it happened with a laugh. I tried bringing it up a few more times, but the other guys just told me I must have been seeing things in the smoke. I know what I saw though. It happened. I believe you, I said. You do, he said, a hint of disbelief in his voice. No one ever believes me. You've told other people, not just down at the firehouse? Just my wife and some of the guys down at the Antlers. Antlers was a bar near the fire station. It was very popular with not just people from Twistchapel, but visitors from out of town as well. I had been a few times with Bridget, but it wasn't really my style. Have you talked about it recently? I asked. Yes, he nodded. Just last night, actually. I wondered if I wasn't the only other person who believed him. What were the odds that the two chili chefs with paranormal abilities were both killed in a short period of time? That seemed like more than just a simple coincidence to me. You've got no idea how helpful you've been, Jerry. I smiled, jumping up and giving him a hug. I've got to go and catch up with a friend, but I think you might have given me some really important information. And no problem, he said, blushing as I let go of the hug. I ran off in the direction of my car. It was getting late and I was on the cusp of a motive. I crossed my fingers that Derek had made it back already and had some interesting. Chapter 9. Bart and I waited in the alleyway that we last saw Derek in. I was hoping he'd be back by now, but there was no sign of him. I figured I could wait a little longer for him, and if he didn't show up then I'd have to talk out the possibilities with Drake. That was going to be a little difficult without bringing in the paranormal angle, but I had to at least try. One of the people I talked to was the killer, and we had to stop them before they got away with. Do you think Marvin was a warlock or something? I asked. You know, since he could blast water out of his hands. I mean, he could have been, shrugged Bart. The more likely answer is that he was an aquamancer. An aquamancer? I asked. Is that just like a pyromancer but they play with water instead of fire? Bingo, purred the cat. They aren't very common, but they are typically drawn towards jobs dealing with the sea, things like fishing or naval warfare. The British had a ton of them back in the day, that's why their navy was so strong. I hadn't really heard of one using their abilities in a fire environment, but it makes sense. If more of them went into being firefighters, they would probably be really good at it. Makes sense to me, I nodded. I wonder why more don't. Probably because it's too easy to tell when something strange is going on, said Bart, beginning to lick at his paws. No offense to Jerry, but he just seemed like a normal guy. Even he noticed that something was going on, though. If you're out on the water all of the time instead, then you probably won't get noticed if you happen to be bringing in more fish than the average person, or water randomly appears near you. I thought about all the dangerous shipping shows they had on TV a few years back. Who knows how many of them were aquamancers? By the way, I asked, what are the side effects of wolfsbane? I don't think we've ever gone completely over it. Mostly what you've heard happened to Marvin, said Bart. Nausea, vomiting, sometimes mouth or other parts of your body on fire or tingly, death shortly after that. So you agree it's probably what killed him? The cat nodded. Witches used them in various potions, but they always had that nasty side effect of killing or seriously harming the recipient. Took them a few centuries to realize it wasn't a good idea to keep trying the same deadly concoction over and over. Noted, I said. Should you be teaching me about potions, by the way? You've taught me some spells, but nothing involving a cauldron. I can if you want me to, he said. You want a love potion to help you win Drake's affection? Just kidding. You seem to have that more or less under control. I blushed but didn't say anything. I know love potions were more of a thing younger witches would make, but I would be lying if I said the thought never crossed my mind just once or twice. I imagine it would lead to a mostly unfulfilling relationship, though. I looked up as the soft sound of feet approached us. I'm here, said Derek a few feet away. About time, said Bart. Thanks for announcing yourself like a regular guy, rather than sneaking up on us in your wolf form, I said. I appreciate the effort. Whatever helps put you at ease, I guess, he shrugged. Any news on your front? Quite a bit, I said. We found out that Marvin was able to shoot a cannon of water out of his hands, meaning he was an aquamancer or at least someone with magical abilities. Probably helped a lot being a firefighter. The man that told us was telling some people about it at a local bar last night. His audience could have included the chili competitors from out of town. As possible no one took him seriously, but maybe the killer did. Interesting, said Derek, processing the new piece of information. That makes both deaths not only linked with these cook-offs but also linked to the paranormal. Maybe there's a motive somewhere in there. There might be, but I haven't totally found it yet. However, I believe Marvin was killed with wolfsbane, whether intentionally or not. One of the cooks, Mary, had some with her. When we looked at it closer, she noticed some was missing. It's possible someone tampered with it when she wasn't looking, but also possible she slipped some into Marvin's sample of chili. Wouldn't she not mention that some of the plant was missing if she was the one that poisoned him? He asked. Possibly, I admitted. However, she could also know that if any traces of wolfsbane show up in his system, she'll be the one they go after. Maybe she's building a story to help protect her when that happens. What makes her a suspect besides having the plant? Asked Derek. She talked pretty negatively about your werewolf buddy from Spring Hill, said Bart. That, plus she was on the list to appear at the Spring Hill chili cook-off, but says she didn't show up. She didn't go into specifics. I added. 2 other suspects that were supposedly in Spring Hill include John and Chad. John is always in a foul mood, and was there when they found Ned. First I thought he had the motive to kill Marvin because of jealousy, but he brought up some good points about how if he was going to do it, he'd go about it in a different way. What about Chad? Asked Derek. I don't think you mentioned him when we first talked. I didn't, I agreed. However, he was with Marvin the whole time and could have slipped something into his chili. He also was there with John when they found Ned. John claims he was with him the whole time though and couldn't have killed Ned in secret. Although they could be working together, recommended the werewolf. True, I nodded. The final real suspect I have is Lucas. He's been giving off a weird vibe to me, and has also been at the murder locations. More like you've been giving him a weird vibe, smirked Bart. Find anything out about Ravendale? I asked while shooting Bart a deadly glare. The cat didn't seem bothered. Not too much, unfortunately, said Derek. I'm sorry. That's okay, I said. I didn't know what I was expecting. Was there anything at all? Basically just that they heard about the woman you mentioned earlier, the one who was found in the lake. No one has been able to identify her or learn her name though. They agreed with your assessment that she was bitten by a vampire but was killed before turning. It's a bit concerning. Concerning? More than the normal amount of concerning when someone dies? Asked Bart. If a vampire was turning her, it was probably because this woman wanted to be turned. Vampirism acts quickly, so she must have been killed within just a couple of hours of being bitten. It wouldn't have been a vampire that killed her but someone else. Could it be a vampire hunter? I asked. Probably not, said Derek, shaking his head. There have been no reports in Spring Hill about one in a while. Any leads on who killed her? I asked. Even if it wasn't connected with this particular case, it'd help me to have answers for Warren when I talk to him next. There isn't anything official, but this sort of thing does happen from time to time. There are people that strive to become werewolves too, and there is also a delay before the infection takes hold. Occasionally people are killed before that happens. But how? Asked Bart, his interest piqued. It isn't that obvious to know. When someone is turning, the average human would have no idea and probably wouldn't believe the person even if they told them. Unless they were intimate with the person, I said, thinking about the kind of person that would be told of the change. Families or spouses might be told, I bet. Exactly, nodded Derek. When we find people that are killed between the time they are bitten and before they turn, it is almost always a family member that killed them. It's nearly guaranteed. So the person who killed her was probably related to her in some way, I said. Slowly. They must have been from out of town too, since no one has recognized who she is yet. Why would someone kill their family just because they wanted to be a vampire? Or werewolf? Asked Bart. The person is still the same, just with new abilities. People are scared of us, said Derek. They think we are monsters with no power to control ourselves. When family members learn that their loved ones have been bitten, they think it's already too late for them. How sad, said Bart. telling your family only for them to turn around and kill you. Even though Derek didn't think it was much, I had a sudden realization. I was pretty sure I knew who that woman was, but just needed one more piece of information. Did you get the list of the Ravendale cook-off? I asked. Derek nodded, pulling a slip of paper out again. I almost forgot. I asked my contacts and this is what they gave me. I didn't mention it because I'm fairly certain the list is identical to the one you have from Spring Hill. I took the list and scanned through it. My eyes grew larger as I did a second pass of it. Derek was wrong. It wasn't the same. There was a name missing from it that had been on the Spring Hill list, and that person was here today too. When I talked to them earlier, they mentioned being at Ravendale. Are you sure this is right? I asked. Someone is missing here that was at the other cook-offs, including this one. I'm positive, said Derek. They weren't able to find the list of those who were scheduled to appear, so they instead gave me the list of everyone who signed in the day of the event. This is all starting to make sense now, I said, looking through the sign-in sheet again to make sure I hadn't missed the name. I think I was right from the beginning. What do you mean? Asked Bart. Who did you guess from the beginning? No, not a particular person, I said. I mean that these 3 murders are all connected. The person that killed Ned and Marvin is the same one who killed the woman in Ravendale. Do you know who it is now? Asked Derek. I do, I said, turning down the alley and beginning to get back to the cook-off. I need to go confront them before they leave. I can't be seen here in this form, said Derek, following behind me. I'll have to be in my wolf form, watching from a distance. Won't that cause a scene? Asked Bart, floating behind us. Don't worry. I'm very good at getting around unnoticed. However, if something goes wrong when you confront this person, Zoey, I probably won't be able to get to you in time. Thanks for the thought, but don't worry. I smiled. I can handle myself just fine. Chapter 10. Making it back to the cook-off, I hurried on towards where the killer's station was. I hoped they were still there, or this was going to get complicated. Zoey, came Drake's voice. He was off to the side watching my half-jog towards the end of the chilly stations. What are you doing? Wait a couple of minutes, then follow me, I said, not bothering to turn back. And make sure he heard me. I didn't want to scare off the killer with police presence. Maybe they'd be more willing to be open if they thought we were alone. I arrived just as the suspect finished cleaning up their station, putting the cleaned-out chili vat into a large black bag. Lucas, we need to talk, I said, walking up to him. Oh, hello again, he said, zipping up his bag and turning to face me. Have some more questions for me? I do, actually. I nodded, trying to catch my breath. Where's your wife? She wasn't able to make it, he shrugged. She's feeling under the weather. Is she back at home in Spring Hill or in Ravendale? Lucas hesitated. His demeanor changed from relaxed to very tense at the mention of the town, and he locked eyes with me. I'm afraid I don't understand what you're insinuating. You keep mentioning that you're married. First, I thought I must have been coming across as flirting when I didn't mean to. Now I'm starting to think it's out of guilt. You mentioned taking her with you when you went to Ravendale for the cook-off, yet you're not on the sign-in sheet, I said, pulling out the paper. Where did you get that? He asked, narrowing his eyes. You know what? Doesn't matter. My wife and I got into a disagreement while we were there, and I decided I wasn't in the mood to attend the cook-off. Things like that happen from time to time. A woman's body was found in a lake near Ravendale recently, I continued. In addition to having all her jewelry and identification stolen, she had strange bite mark on her neck, unrelated to her death. Lucas stared silently back at me, waiting for me to continue. Ned McFinn, the man who was killed in Spring Hill, also exhibited some strange behavior, I bluffed. I didn't want to out him as being a werewolf, but Lucas knew what I was talking about. It seems to me that those 2 murders were possibly related. I didn't know for sure, but it was a hunch. Marvin dying from a poisoning was also a strange coincidence, given that there were possibly 2 other deaths in the previous cook-off towns. How could I have possibly killed Marvin? Lucas sneered, picking up his bag. You were with me when it happened. I didn't have the means or the motive. One of the cooks here is known to carry poisonous plants. Maybe she has the means. Another cook is always coming in second place, giving him a motive. Why don't you go accuse them? I don't have to stand here and listen to this. You're talking utter nonsense. He made to leave, but I stepped up to block his way. Careful, Zoey, cautioned Bart. I'm not so sure getting close to him is a good idea if you're right and he's the murderer. Before you go, I said, I actually heard a little bit of nonsense recently. Someone was saying that Marvin had the ability to summon water out of thin air. Doesn't that sound crazy? Lucas stood his ground, staring down at me. This is what I think happened, I continued. When you went to Ravendale, your wife told you that she wanted to gain some special powers, let's say. She told you after the process began and you couldn't take it well. You thought she was going to become a monster and wanted to stop it before she did something she regretted. Later on, now believing in people with these abilities back at home in Spring Hill, you began piecing together that Ned might have also had some. You procured a silver sword, knowing it was the only way to kill him, and attacked him when he least expected it. Finally, last night, you were down at the Antlers. You heard a crazy drunk telling a tale that was so out there no one believed it. No one, that is, except for you. You knew these stories weren't just fiction but real. Believing that Marvin also had certain abilities, you plotted his death. You knew Mary carried dangerous plants with her, which would let you have a perfect murder weapon. If that failed, at least you could blame it on the always angry and always second-place John Lorden. Whether or not you're right, you always took a coward's way out, I said, trying to rile him up. I couldn't go to the police with the connection being paranormal, so I needed him to get angry and speak without thinking. You always killed your target when they were unaware. Marvin was poisoned without knowing it. Ned was attacked in the back. Your wife, Cynthia, he said quietly. Her name was Cynthia. I paused as he put his bag down before looking back to me. You must believe it too, he said, a grin appearing on his face. Believe what? I asked, a little caught off guard by his happy tone. These stories, he continued. Vampires, werewolves, all of the things that go bump in the night. Monsters. You must believe them too to have figured out that I was involved in all three instances. I was making the world a better place. The world is a better place because you killed your wife? I asked. He must be joking. Careful with this guy, Zoey, said Bart. I don't like the way his eyes are looking. I didn't notice it until Bart mentioned it, but Lucas' eyes had gone wide, looking around wildly. It looked as if he was losing control. I thought no one would believe me when I told them, he said. I killed Cynthia before she could finally turn into a vampire. I knew I had already lost her, and that if I didn't stop her, she'd go on a rampage. I took it hard, of course, at least at first. I slowly realized that she died the second the vampire bit her, infecting her with that disease. He was the one that killed her. All I killed was a monster. I was at a bar in Spring Hill, one that I recommended to John and Chad. Actually, when I heard strange rumors about Ned, people whispered about how they had seen him acting strange at full moons, and how there was talk of him being connected with a large black dog that seemed to appear only when he was in town. My company had helped build a metalworking shop a while back, and I had made myself a key to the place. I went in looking for anything silver. When I found that sword, I realized what had happened. And that was, I asked, imploring him to continue. I was being called down a new path. I was being called to become a monster hunter, he said, his smile spreading further than I'd ever seen before. It was my destiny. When I came to Twistchapel again, I heard rumors about it. Freak. I was sad to hear it was Marvin. I truly was, but I had no choice. Had to kill him. As you said, I took that weird plant while Mary was serving some people, and then I stuck it in a specially made serving for when Marvin came around. So you did it, I clarified, raising my voice just a bit in hopes that other people could hear the confession. You killed those 3 people? I killed those 3 monsters, he shouted, raising his hands high. Don't you see? I have helped keep our small town safer. Without me, those 3 freaks would still be running around, killing countless innocent people. Sorry to interrupt, said Drake, walking up behind Lucas. The crazed man didn't seem to realize that everyone around us stopped to listen. Did I hear you correctly? 3 people, including Marvin, were killed by you. Yes. Cynthia would be so proud of me if she was never tricked by that vampire into throwing her life away. Have you come to thank me? Asked Lucas. You should be on your guard as well, detective. There are other rumors. Dealing with unnatural people in this town. One of your old mayors was a vampire. Did you know that? Okay, man, said Drake calmly, taking out a pair of handcuffs. Why don't you calm down and we can take you somewhere safe to tell us more? I'd be happy to, detective, said Lucas, not resisting at all while Drake cuffed his hands behind his back. He appeared confident that he could convince Drake to see his point of view. I didn't think it was going to quite go the way Lucas thought it would. Did you know there's a witch in Twistchapel too? She runs a business here and talks to spirits. Bart and I shared a look. He was talking about me and he didn't even know it. Apparently I was being watched more than I thought I was, even in my own store. I really needed to be careful. Talk to Bart, even if I thought the coast was clear. Is that right? Asked Drake, his tone as if a toddler just told him the sky was purple. Well, these nice men are going to help you into a car and we'll talk later, okay? I'd be happy to help educate them as well, smiled Lucas as two police officers gently grabbed his arms and directed him away from the crowd. I'll see. When the monsters come out of the shadows, I'll be the one you all turn to. The crowd murmured among themselves as Lucas was taken away, before going on their way as if nothing of note happened. How'd you figure it out? Asked Drake. I thought Ned's death by a silver sword was strange and remembered that silver could kill werewolves according to legend. I lied. I figured I'd see how Lucas would respond to these urban myths, and he seemed to crack. He thought I believed everything he did, and confessed to both murders plus one of his wife. I honestly didn't expect him to go fully crazy. So sad, said Drake, shaking his head. Can you imagine thinking your spouse was a monster like that? I hope they keep him away from Nicole. I'd hate for her to think for a second that Marvin was some sort of wizard or something. That does sound horrible, I said, trying to put on a smile. This just proved me right. I couldn't tell Drake about what I really was, at least not yet. Good job solving this one, smiled Drake, taking my hand and squeezing it. Oh, it was nothing, I smiled. I should really go help the other guys, he said, letting go of my hand. We'll talk again soon, okay? Looking forward to it, I said, watching him walk away. I hope that one day I could be open with him about my secret. It would take some time, but maybe he'd be able to accept it one day. For now, I should just be happy with how things were going. I knew you could do it, Miss Foster, said a man, patting me on the back. And ahead of schedule. What can I say? I said, glancing sideways at Warren. I had a feeling the warlock would show up sooner or later. I'm getting pretty good at this. How did you know to come here? Asked Bart, raising an eyebrow. Seems suspicious. Miss Foster mentioned coming here to Detective Drake earlier, shrugged Warren. Plus, talk of that firefighter's death was all over the town. Figured Miss Foster wouldn't stop until she figured out who did it. I must admit I didn't expect it to be connected to the Ravendale woman. Cynthia, I said. Her name was Cynthia. Yes, he nodded. I'll be sure to mention that to my employer when I inform them that the matter has been solved. Looks like you won't be able to bring the killer into them since he's in police custody, I said. I just had to figure out the who and the why. Now that I know both, my job and yours is complete. I assume we aren't getting compensated for this one as usual? Asked Bart. Actually, I do have a gift, smirked Warren, handing me a small box. It was covered in birthday wrapping paper with a bow on top. Thanks, but it isn't my birthday, I said. I know that, silly, he said. I believe that will come in handy sooner rather than later. However, you mustn't open it until she arrives. She? I asked. What was he talking about? Congratulations on another case solved, Miss Foster, said Warren, ignoring my question and walking away. We'll be in touch. I looked down at the box as he left. Part of me wanted to throw it away and another part wanted to open it up immediately. Instead, I put it in my pocket. For another time. I didn't know what he meant and I didn't always trust him. But Warren had an annoying habit of being right. I think I'm going to have Bridget come over, I said to Bart, pulling out my phone to text her. After such a crazy day, I needed to tell someone about. Oh, fun, laughed Bart. I can't wait to tell her how you wouldn't stop hitting on the killer. Don't tell people that. I laughed. I didn't want people thinking I was talking to spirits, but I really didn't want people thinking I was trying to get together with murderers.